Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Out of Spec Guide. I'm Max, and I'm joined by Dave today for another debate. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey Max, what's going on? It's a lot of fun when I do these with you, and this looks like a real good one here tonight.
Yes, it's one that you're going to have also some personal stake in. So, you recently got a Lucid Air, which people can see on your channel, right?
I did, yes. I lost my mind. I think my wife's maybe not speaking to me, but we'll see. No, it's all good. It's amazing car. I'm so happy that I'm able to enjoy it and learn about it. So
Yeah. Well, congrats. I know you got yours used, but today I want to talk about them in the context of being kind of a new vehicle, or you could get it used as well. But we're comparing this with the Porsche Taycan, which is, in my opinion, the best kind of sporty EV. And the Lucid, you could speak to this too, but being more of that kind of apex luxury SUV that also now is trying to go after the sporty throne because they're coming out with this even higher performance Sapphire model soon. These are both, I think, great handling cars, both of them being ground up EV architectures. And if we just look at a high level between them, I know we touched on price. They're actually pretty close to each other. The Lucid being a bit more expensive than the Porsche, but Lucid's going to come out with a base rear wheel drive model soon, and that'll make them really comparable, it seems. But who knows when
yeah,
that'll actually drop.
I actually just saw the Pure. So within the Lucid, they have five different models.
Mm-hmm.
Lucid, they have the Pure, and the cheapest, as you mentioned, is going to be the rear wheel drive. That version of the car will not be out till third quarter or fourth quarter at the earliest.
Yeah.
But the Pure rear all wheel drive is out yesterday, and that does not have the glass roof. And I saw it and sat in it for the first time. Then you step up to the Touring, which adds a bunch of things. Same size battery pack at 92 kilowatt hours, and as the Pure. But when you go up to the Grand Touring, that's where if you combine the Grand Touring with the 19-inch wheels, you're talking about 112 kilowatt hour battery pack. This car has the slipperiest coefficient of drag equal to the EQS of zero point 0.2, which is amazing. And I know that the turbo Taycan is a little bit not quite as slippery, 0.23,
Mhm.
and I think that the Turbo S might even be a little higher than that, 0.25 or somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But they're still very slippery cars in terms of the coefficient of drag. When you do go to the Grand Touring, though, with the 19-inch wheels, that's where you get the 516 EPA mile range. And then when you jump up to the Grand Touring Performance, that has a 118 kilowatt hour battery pack. Still a dual motor car, but crazy, 1,111 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. And then the Sapphire, which is going to be their halo car, is actually going to be a tri-motor with over, I think, 1,200 horsepower, but they're claiming that it's going to be doing 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. I mean, honestly, who needs this, Max? But that's the range of their cars.
Yeah, I mean, if they're charging the price, they should deliver it because Plaid delivers, not far off performance for a lot cheaper, but I'm sure the Sapphire will be better in many other ways. But yeah, that's a great kind of overview of the specs and the trims, Dave. We'll go over those also in a second on their website, but just high level overview of these cars. I've always viewed Taycan as kind of like the EV Panamera, even though Porsche says that's not the case. I think it kind of is, right? It's a four-door sedan, and it has this sporty kind of personality because it is a Porsche. You buy it through a dealer, just like it's always worked, or you can order it online with the configuration, but of course that's still delivered through a dealer. The Lucid is this luxury sedan, but kind of like Rivian, right? Because it's an EV and it's ground up and it's a startup, they're able to make it so good that we were talking about this earlier. It kind of does actually deliver on the sporty goods as well, even in those Grand Touring and Grand Touring Performance trims, just because it's so darn fast. I mean, who needs all that performance? I don't know, but it's there. But
Yeah,
overall, I would say it's more of this kind of Grand Tourer vibe of a car
absolutely.
over in the tradition of what that means, which is just right highway cruiser, great driver assistance now, which is like a $10,000 option. It's got all that going for it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is even though the name of the car is the Air, it does not have an air suspension. So it's a regular, shock absorber plus dynamic active damper system. But I'll tell you what, Max, I've been driving this car. The ride is actually the highlight of the car. It's a very nice cabin. The glass roof comes all the way up over your head. and it's really a grand touring. I can't wait to actually road trip this car down to Florida with the amount of range that it has, plus the comfort, massaging seats. It's really just a great place. I'm thinking I'm going to go to sleep in it tonight instead of my bed upstairs. It's that comfortable.
Yeah, it really does seem like a nice place to be. I've heard nothing but the same things. Colton, the out of spec detailing channel, he really loves the interior as well. And I know your specific car is probably going to be stolen by Kyle for some road trips as well. So it's really going to see the
Yeah.
road a lot. And it seems like the perfect car to do it. But for today, let's go over what we're going to talk about in terms of categories. I want to kind of compare these two cars on the basis of their value, their practicality, the range and charging, which is kind of has to do with their EV components, how fun they are to drive, and their capabilities in that area, and then lastly, kind of the technology and the features they deliver between the two. So I guess we'll just start off with value. Let me switch over to the configurator, but we kind of touched on this, Dave. What do you think about the kind of difference in prices and options overall between these two cars?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is there are very few options that you can get with the Lucid. So, for example, on the touring model, which is kind of the mid spec, you can actually opt for a glass roof, which is $4,500. The car does not come standard with Dream Drive Pro, which means that it does not have LiDAR, radar, sonar built into it. It's lacking the hardware, but more importantly, what that means, if you don't spend 10 grand, you're not going to get lane centering, which seems kind of crazy to me. I know that with the Taycan, you need to have you need to have the adaptive cruise plus InnoDrive in order to achieve the lane centering. But and then in addition to that, there's an option. Some of the paint colors have options depending on the trims. And the wheels, you can either get 19, 20s, or 21s depending on the trim. And then lastly, there's a 21 speaker stereo system available, which is a Dolby Atmos system, which I'm not super impressed with. It's a $4,000 option, and it's okay. It's not anything that's going to wow me, and I don't mean to sound crazy, but I've heard better stereos. Honestly, the Model S stereo that comes with just the base car is amazing.
Yeah, I know Tesla's premium audio systems have been kind of punching above their weight lately, but I know Kyle also says he's not particularly impressed with the sound system in the Lucid,
Yeah.
especially for the price of the car. One of those disappointments, but it is nice that they do give you still a spectrum of, like, I think, interesting paint colors, better than Tesla to choose from. The wheel options, of course, which will impact your range a lot. So you do get some configuration options, but then we go into Porsche land, and Taycan is like an ecosystem of cars.
Yeah,
It's
you better be real careful when you're specking out a Taycan. I know you got that 82K there as the base,
yeah.
and with the base pure, you're talking, I don't know, I think it's 87 and change. They're offering 7,500 bucks back on that, so it's right in that same range as the base rear wheel drive Taycan.
Mhm.
But that Taycan, keep in mind, for that 82K is the small battery pack. It's not the larger battery pack. But boy, you can really run up the options on the Porsches like insane. So you got to be careful.
It's classic Porsche territory. I believe already you can get a Taycan all to like $200,000. And they don't even have the
Yes.
turbo GTS model that's supposed to compete with the Plaid and Sapphire yet. So it's classic Porsche, but just high level overview. You've got the normal sedan style. You've got the Sport Turismo, which is like a kind of classic wagon, almost competing with like a gas car like an RS6 or the AMG E63. Then you've got a Cross Turismo, which is, I like to think of it as like a really fancy Outback, or like a lifted
Yeah.
more wagon. I'd much rather have
Yeah.
this than an Outback, but that kind of class of thing. So those are the general body styles. Then you've got classic Porsche trims. I think they have, what is it, 4S, which is the dual motor all-wheel drive one. If you don't get the base rear-wheel drive, you've got GTS, which is faster. Then you've got Turbo, which is faster still, and people are angry about because it doesn't actually have a turbocharger. And then you have Turbo
Yeah.
S, which currently is the highest performance one, getting 2.6 seconds 0 to 60. So competitive, it seems, with the Lucid in terms of straight line performance and
Well, the
general.
only thing is, if you were to buy a Turbo S for 187 400, good luck. because you're gonna want to have a lot of options. We've spec'd these
Sure.
out, Kyle and I, playing online, and you can get them up over $220,000 like that.
Yeah.
Whereas at least in the Lucid with the Grand Touring Performance, it's 179 and it's going to match the same speed. The one thing that I would say, Max, and I know you didn't have a separate category here, but the Porsche is just a way better looking car. I mean, the Cross Turismo to me is just gorgeous. I mean, it really is. Nothing to say that I don't dislike the Lucid look, but I mean, look at this thing. This is right off of the Mission E, the concept car from years ago. The name Taycan means wild horse. It comes from the Stuttgart, their coat of arms where they have the horse. And I just think that everything about this Taycan is just amazing. And I know we'll talk about charging speeds and range in a little bit, but they're very conservative when it comes to those two categories of range and speed of charging.
Yeah, no, maybe we should definitely consider adding a style category for future debates, especially when we're talking about high value cars like this, right? You're spending all this money, you want your car to look nice. And I'll give you this, Dave. I do like how the Lucid Air looks from the front, but I agree, especially from the side and the rear and with most of the stock wheel options, I think the Taycan is just much more of a, I don't know, statement car. And of
Yeah,
course, it's got the
I
Porsche
almost,
badge.
when we were kids, before SUVs were out, when I was kids, not when I was a kid, you weren't even like, you weren't even a thought. But everybody had either a station wagon or a four-door sedan, and then maybe, you had a sports car to kind of complement that. And I almost see the four-door sedan and the sports car thing going on here, but that's sort of where that's first of all very subjective on my part. But I just sat in a Taycan the other day, and I've been in them before. I've driven them before, 4S. I've never driven the Turbo or Turbo S, and I mean, when you get in that car, it just feels like, you know what? I'm an athlete. I'm a major league baseball player. I'm a sprinter. I am a pro athlete. This thing is a sporty car. And when you get in the Lucid, it has a very different, classy, intellectual, sort of classic feel to it. And they're both great. I think I need one of each in the garage if I'm not, if I'm
Yeah.
not kidding around, of course. But that's they're very different appearance cars. They're both relatively low, but when you get into the Taycan, you're sitting on the ground pretty good there in that car. Yeah, the Porsche feels like a little bit more like a jet fighter cockpit to me, especially with the way that center console goes up and you've got the screen there. It feels great. Everything where my right arm rests on the center console and my left arm, it's definitely a super comfortable place, but it feels like you're in a sports car. It just does.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of envelops around you. Whereas the Lucid, it's actually not as spacious of an interior as their website makes it out to be. And you know this, Dave. But even though it's not spacious in terms of the liters and the numbers, it does feel a bit more open, especially because of that cool glass roof they've got. And
Yeah,
interestingly,
well,
yeah,
I got to talk to you about that.
okay,
So I
talk
sat
about it.
I sat in a Pure yesterday with the solid roof,
Yeah,
and one of the things about the Lucid is that the driving position of where I'm 6'5", where I put my seat pretty far back, and as far out as the steering wheel comes, I still feel like that the windshield is close to my head, whereas in the Porsche it's way farther away from me, and it works fine in a Lucid as long as you have the glass roof, but the Pure without the glass roof, I'm going to use the word claustrophobic. It does not work, at least not for me. I felt very constrained in there, and it's a nice sort of Alcantara headliner. It's beautiful in the Pure, but not having that glass roof, I think, changes the dynamic of the car. Whereas I sat in a Taycan the other day that did not have a glass roof, and I did not feel that same perception.
Yeah, that's an interesting note. Once the Pures start rolling out, I've also heard this from other reviewers that it does have this different feeling and it does make the interior feel significantly more claustrophobic. And also, just design wise, I think takes away a really key element of the car. I get that they're doing it to reduce costs because making that combined windshield and glass roof, I'm sure, is not cheap. And I'm sure insurance companies don't like the idea of replacing it when you get a chip in it. But I think it is, something that honestly, if I were getting a Lucid Air in a position to get one, that would be like an iconic part of it for me.
Yeah, the car for me, I wouldn't buy the car without the glass roof.
Hmm.
Again, on the Touring, it's 4,500. On the Grand Touring, it comes standard. To me, that's a must-have, just because of. See, the thing about the Lucid also is it's got a very thick A pillar that slopes up very close to your head, and at first glance, it's a little tough to get in and out. You got to be careful that you don't hit your head. At least I do in the Lucid. The Taycan is a little bit challenging and it's low to get into as well. But once you're in both these cars, you're fine. And the visibility out of both of these cars is quite good. I was surprised. I thought the visibility out of the Lucid was going to be pure because of how thick that A pillar is. But somehow it works. And I'm not going to complain about that A pillar.
Yeah, fair enough. And it works well also in terms of aerodynamics. We'll get to efficiency in our next category, but surprisingly, very efficient car. Part of that reason probably is the really raked A pillars and just that design of the cockpit and the front end. But on the note of, for practicality, cargo, well, the Lucid is a sedan, and the thing that's always surprised me about it is when you open up that trunk, wow, that's a big cavity in there.
Yeah. It is big and it's flat to put in your thing. It doesn't go down, but if you lift up in the back of the trunk, there's a big cavernous space that you can put things in, and there's storage on either side of the car. On the left-hand side, that's where the charging cable is stored, but the frunk in this car is something to write home about. It's massive,
I forgot
and
about frunks. Those exist, yes.
yeah, the frunk is huge on the Lucid. I mean, it's not Ford F-150 Lightning huge, but it's damn close. It's also powered on the Touring and the Grand Touring. It's not powered on the Pure. And what's interesting is it has two latches on it. And with the Pure, when you put the hood down, it actually has a soft close, but it's not power. But the trunk, the frunk, you see that right there in the video you were just showing. Once you open it up, you go, okay, that's really wide and big, but then it goes cavernously deep below that. It's got a two-tiered shelf system. It's just massive. I wish the Lucid, was a hatchback. I'm not a fan of this trunk. I think that it's if you look at it in terms of folding down the rear seats and how much cubic feet you have compared to the Taycan, it may be close, but there's just such a practical nature to having a hatchback. I really wish this car were a hatchback. Unfortunately, it's not.
I agree with you. I think that packaging of a hatchback or sportback, whatever manufacturers want to call it, is always more practical. That said, if they're going to go for the traditional classic sedan design, it is nice that they have that cool clamshell trunk and also, like you were saying, the tiered frunk. And I've also got to give them a shout out. I mean, this is the coolest 360-degree thing I've seen on their website. It's not even a
Yeah,
video playing. I'm able to just click and drag around it.
I know.
Wow, they actually have a pretty cool virtual showroom thing going on. But
Yeah, I've played with that for hours,
oh,
Max.
I have no doubt in your
It's yeah, it's really excellent in the colors and
on the Taycan, you said you wish the Lucid Air was a hatchback. Big note in the Taycan's favor is that, right, we've talked about this, you can get that Sport Turismo option if the normal, sedan style isn't doing it for you. But I
yeah,
will, look at that opening. That's nothing like the Lucid, way smaller, more
yeah.
like a traditional kind of sporty sedan like you would expect. And then I actually, I should know this, but I don't think the Taycan has a usable front trunk, does it?
I don't remember.
I'm gonna
I
put an
can't remember
annotation
if
in the
it does.
video to double check this in editing, but I believe there is no front trunk in the Taycan, despite it being a ground up EV. And I know Kyle always says people overblow front trunks, but some people really like to have them. And having a substantial one in the Air versus, I'm pretty sure, none in the Taycan, or if there is one, like hardly, any space.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and what I would say is because the frunk in the Lucid is power, I think people will be a lot more apt to use that than they would otherwise. And so, for example, in my Model S, when I would push down to close the frunk, the metal would actually, I was worried I was going to bend the metal. So just pushing a button and having it close on its own, I think gives me the peace of mind that I'll use it way more often than I would with a non-power frunk.
Yeah. So just kind of that practicality with the power and the ability to, just quickly, I think, have it, make itself available to you. Also, I was just praising Lucid's site, and now I've got to give Porsche a knock because their site seems to not be doing well on my Mac. And not to brag, but I got a pretty speedy computer for editing videos here, and something is going on with the Porsche website. But
Did you pay your ISP last month, Max? I mean,
I
maybe.
I will say Xfinity in Colorado is not great. But anyhow,
Yeah,
let's get to the
yeah.
next category for both of these, which is going to be range and charging efficiency. We can think of this as kind of just the EV bits of each car, right? These are both ground up EVs. They're both honestly pretty great architectures, bleeding edge. The Porsche is 800 volts for charging. The Lucid is like nominally, I think, 912 volts. It's
Yeah, for the 112 kilowatt hour battery pack, the
yeah,
Touring I think is around 7 and change.
yeah,
The high voltage cars are clearly, can take advantage at EA. So when you plug into a 150, you're going to be pulling higher speeds than 150.
yeah.
But this Lucid, we've seen the charging. Not me because I haven't done my charging tests yet. But the Lucid is it's a beast when it comes to charging
Yeah.
in terms of peak. What I'm not sure of is how long it will hold the peak into the curve. That's something I'm gonna have to check out. But the Taycan, the thing about the Taycan is that car will pull 270 kilowatts pretty deep into the pack, and so I think that okay, yeah, the Lucid may charge at 320 plus kilowatts peak, but I think that I'd be surprised if the Lucid is that much of a faster charging car than the Taycan, because Porsche is super conservative with their speeds, claimed speeds that they have, and how deep into the pack they go.
Yep, we'll get into range in just a second here, but yeah, classic kind of German conservatism going with, I guess the minimum number they can achieve or just under promising in general. Lucid will make a big deal though about their charging speeds at peak, though we did notice this is, granted is not the most common situation, but let's say, right, those new Tesla superchargers that have the magic dock, the Lucid, because of its needing to use the onboard booster, and its really high voltage architecture actually doesn't get great charging speeds on those superchargers, does it?
Yeah, the most we're seeing is about 45 kilowatts, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a little disappointing. I think when the V4s come out with the thousand, amps, that problem will go away. The one thing about the Wonderbox is that it is bidirectional charging as well.
Hmm.
So whereas similar to the EGMP platform cars, where you can put energy in, you can also take energy out. In the Wonderbox, with the right kind of connector, which I have to research and buy. Yeah, and I don't think the Taycan has bidirectional charging, like any kind of you know being able to charge something, another car or your home or anything like that. So that's a pretty big selling point for the Lucid.
Yeah, the Lucid having the Wonder Box built in, right, with being able to deliver over 19 kilowatts out of the car, I think does in some ways almost future-proof it. Because let's be real, right, 112 kilowatt hour battery, I mean, that's a big thing sitting in your garage or your driveway. And if you can make use of that as a home backup power source or just to power utilities or something, that's going to be really interesting. Whereas the Taycan, also, a pretty substantial battery pack, doesn't really have that ecosystem or that built in to its architecture. But on the note of charging, right, it still does have a pretty good charging curve. It does have the fast
It does.
capabilities on the right 350 kilowatt, EA chargers, or what have you. So it does have that going for it. And it also has plug-in charge, which does make it a pretty great CCS road trip car.
Yeah, plug and charge on both cars. I think it has to be a 2021 Taycan. In 2020, they didn't have plug and charge. and the Lucid has plug and charge as well. And I've charged 2 times now at EA, and it worked seamlessly both times. No apps, fired up pretty quickly. The handshake was excellent on the Lucid, so I was very impressed with that. One point I want to make, going back to the bidirectional charging on the Lucid. Keep in mind that the Grand Touring with 112 kilowatt hour battery pack, a Tesla Powerwall 2 is 13 kilowatt hours. And so it's almost as if you got a Lucid sitting in your driveway with 112 kilowatt hour battery pack, that's like having 10 Powerwalls in your garage. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of getting to an interesting place, right? Where vehicle prices, I mean, let's be honest, neither of these are value vehicles, Dave, but vehicle
No.
prices, if you're going to have these cars in general, having them also serve as batteries does make an interesting value proposition, because standalone lithium ion batteries or solutions like a Powerwall on their own aren't cheap at all either.
Yeah, no, the car's a generator.
Yeah.
Basically, your house goes down. I don't know how long it's going to power it for, but you're going to power your house with this thing. It's
Yeah,
great.
it won't quite be the F-150 Lightning with the extended battery pack, but it's honestly not far off, especially in the Lucid, which, speaking of batteries, I think gets us into range. Porsche here advertises pretty conservative figures based off the EPA, because they go through a pretty rigorous cycle. But honestly, the car does a little bit better than Porsche's numbers. That said, I still don't think it compares to the Lucid, which, right, with that Grand Touring trim can get like 516 according to the EPA.
Yeah, so let's be real. Its EPA rated range is 516, and if you drive it like super slow, yeah, you could probably eke that out in the right conditions on the right weather. But realistically, this car will go at 70 miles an hour, 425, 430 miles. That's just insane. To put that into perspective, I drove my Model S, which has an EPA rated range of 405 miles, and from here to Florida and back, and I had to stop 6 times. I think I'm only going to have to stop 3 times with this car. And that's just life altering, especially when you have the unreliable EA network there. The fewer times you can charge at the CCS docks, stations, the better. So, yeah, amazing range, and I just can't wait to test it out. I'm going to be driving this car down to Florida in 2 weeks.
Yeah, totally fair. I think with the one exception we mentioned earlier of the supercharger bottleneck, you really don't have many charging issues in the car. And the fact that you get that sweet range, I think is just a kicker on top of that. Because, yeah, having to visit fewer public chargers is nothing but a good thing, especially when you're driving a car like this. I mean, these kinds of cars, both of them, I think, just want to be driven for long periods of time. The Taycan will give you that, but the Lucid will just do it longer, which I don't know, it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, it is. But keep in mind that Porsche Taycan, if you drive it conservatively, you're going to get over 300 miles of range. You really will. It's super conservative, 270, or what do they say for the big battery pack with the 4S or even the rear wheel drive?
Let me navigate
It's
there.
high 200s. You're going to get high 200s. It's quite good, but it's not
Yeah.
Lucid good, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's more like, honestly, Model S standard battery realistic range than it is Lucid. So still very conservative figures on Porsche's end. But yeah, the Lucid is just, I think, safely in a category above for just absolute range. Though, aside from these long haul trips, which you actually do make a lot of, Dave, and so does Kyle, I think for a lot of buyers, this might not be as relevant as it seems, as the numbers on the website might lead you to believe. But it's definitely worth bringing up for both.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I think the trend is to smaller battery packs over time and
Yeah.
better infrastructure and just stop more often. That's all. But that's a different video.
Oh, yeah, and we definitely have to talk about that. But our next category for now is just the driving part of each car. And this is where I am feeling confident because, let's be real, the Taycan's a Porsche, so it does have really great dynamic handling. And of course, they're more than happy to sell you plenty of options to enhance that, like the upgraded battery, better wheels, better brakes, all of these classic Porsche upgrades, which you will bleed money for, but which will give you a smile on your face. Honestly, not even on the road, but on the track, really, realistically, if you're using them.
The best part about the Lucid is the ride and the handling And Max, when my car is out in Colorado, you're going to take it out and you're going to take out a Taycan and you go like, holy smokes, this Lucid handles, I'm going to make a prediction. I think you're going to think it handles as good, if not better, than the Porsche. The difference is that when you're in the Porsche, your mind tells you you're in a sports car,
Yeah.
so it has to handle better. But this thing, this Lucid, is deceiving. The way that these engineers have designed the suspension and the power delivery, this is not just a highway cruiser. The one thing I would say about the Lucid is at low speed, they need to do a little tuning. It kind of bucks when you stop on hold, and it's not super smooth when you actually start to accelerate. The Taycan does a much better job of that, and the gold standard on that is Tesla. It's just so tuned so perfectly. So they have a little bit of tweaks to go with the Lucid, but don't kid yourself. This Lucid, it's a sports car in disguise. I'm telling you.
That is fair, Dave, and I do hope I have the opportunity to cross compare it on one day with Taycan side by side. I don't know if that'll happen, but when I drive it, I'm sure I will have a smile on my face as well. And I believe you because, not to shout out other YouTubers too much, we love that Spec Network, but Jason Caniza, other reviewers who've looked at the Lucid Air and had the opportunity have also just had their socks blown off by it, just because it is darn fast, it handles well. I know you love the ride, so that all makes sense to me. But if you can't get ceramic brakes for it, is it a sports car? I don't know, Dave.
Listen, ceramics I think are a waste of money unless you're on the track. I'd much rather have big steely brakes, and I just think that ceramics for the average consumer is just overkill, and they're yeah, big money. I don't think that's an issue at all. I mean, Lucid gives you proper brakes on this car. When you got a thousand horsepower in my car, it's 819 horsepower in the Grand Touring. It stops really well, and so why do you need to upgrade brakes? Like Kyle on his Tesla, he put Mountain Pass brakes on there. Why didn't Tesla on a Model S Plaid that accelerates as fast as it does? They don't give you a better brake kit? That's crazy. Lucid gives you a proper brake kit. So I mean, maybe I'm being a little controversial here, but I think the brakes on the Lucid are excellent.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, cough, cough, Tesla not providing great stock brakes. It's good to see that other manufacturers, Porsche being a sports car one, and then Lucid, being Lucid, giving a great impression, are giving real great stock brakes. And I'm being a little bit facetious about the ceramic brakes. I think realistically,
Yeah.
both of these cars might, look great and sexy in videos on the track, but I think either if you're the person buying either one of these cars, you are getting them to kind of have comfortable road trips and maybe a little bit of fun on the canyons as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Keep in mind the Lucid weighs about 5,250 pounds in the Grand Touring trim, whereas the Taycan, like for example, if I'm not mistaken, the Taycan base model rear wheel drive is around 4,500 pounds. So it's about a good 700-800 pounds lighter than in the small battery pack configuration. When you start getting up into the Turbo and the Turbo S, they're up around 5,100 pounds. So they're comparably as heavy, and I would not have thought that, but it just tells you how a lot of the componentry that's in the Lucid is miniaturized and smaller. Because think about this: if the Turbo or the Turbo S Taycan is 5,100 pounds, and it has, what's the size of the battery pack in that car? Is it 94 kilowatt
I'll look
hours?
on the specs, but I believe, yeah, just somewhere in
It's not a
94
100
usable.
kilowatt hour battery pack. And so the Lucid, let's just say that it has 18 kilowatt hours larger battery pack, and it only weighs about 100 pounds more than the turbo configuration. It's like, wow. I'm either shocked that the Lucid weighs as little as it does, or I'm shocked that the Taycan weighs as much as it does.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the fact that, right, Lucid, again, startup, ground up architecture. They have this really cool motor technology. They have their performance origins as well. And Porsche is Porsche, but they're also part of the larger Volkswagen group. And this was their first real attempt at a Halo product. And I mean, they did do a really good job, but I think
Yes.
Kyle could probably out-nerd both of us in saying that there's probably a lot of efficiencies that they could squeeze out of this platform if they'd been given another crack at it or, in future generations.
Yeah. He definitely could. I don't know. Sometimes I don't understand what he's saying, but but it's a look. I love, especially that Cross Turismo, like I spoke about. That thing just looks sweet. It really does. So I see your website came back.
It did come back, and now I'm stuck on the configurator. So, classic Porsche website things. On that lovely note, though, let's talk about the technology differences between these two cars because there are some interesting ones. Let's just pick up where we left off. I know you mentioned CarPlay earlier. Now they both have CarPlay. How do you like CarPlay on your Lucid?
Yeah, I think the implementation is a little bit okay. It's just okay. It's you can only have it on the top right screen. You can't have it on the lower center screen. So it's a small area. But for me, it's just the integration of being able to check text messages and being able to use the just hearing the especially I keep what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to open up Waze. I'll use the navigation of Waze, but I'll keep the actual maps up in the Lucid. And what's nice is you can on the Lucid you can actually have the on that screen you see right there, you can have that screen on the Lucid navigation in direction that you're going, and then on the lower screen you can have it in the north up. So from a perspective, I like as a boater, I always like to have, what direction am I going, but I also want to have relative to north, south, east, west, where am I going? And with the Lucid, you can do that with both screens. It's really quite nice. What you can't do though with the implementation of the Waze, I'm sorry, of the Apple CarPlay right now with Lucid, is you can't have the Waze map up on the top and the Lucid map down below. That's not there yet. I'm hoping it is. And you can't move the map or the CarPlay square. It's like a rectangle, and there's wasted space to the right of it just because of the implementation. But you can't put CarPlay down below on the lower screen either. So it's a good first attempt. But there is CarPlay 2 is about to come out. It's about to be released. And I think that's going to give the designers a lot more flexibility about how they can implement it on the upper and lower screen. But I'm just glad they got it out. It's version, I think it's 20.0.58 is what you need in the Lucid in order to actually get CarPlay.
Yeah, and I'm happy for you that you do get CarPlay, though I will give a reservation. CarPlay 2 is a really, for those that haven't seen, this really ambitious update that promises to take over all your screens. I don't know for sure if that requires new hardware or if the Lucid realistically is ever going to support something like that. One can always hope, but I think just for the sake of buying advice, we have to kind of go with what these cars have now. And fortunately for Lucid, they do now offer CarPlay in addition to their native maps, and having the heading, like you mentioned, at the same time is nice. But this car is a lot of screens, and generally, outside of CarPlay, would you say they work well? Would you say it's kind of
Yeah.
smooth? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've been hearing a lot of noise. The UX is not good, but there was a lot of problems with the original UX 1.0. Like for example, you open the door and it would take a good 5 to 7 seconds just for the screens to turn on. Now with UX 2.0 that came out probably about 4 months ago, it's snappy. It comes up fast. I'm hearing so many people complain about the software in the Lucid, and I'm not really seeing it. It's pretty darn good. I'm sure I'll find things in the future. There's been a couple of situations where I'll hit an icon, I'll hit it again, and then it works. Kind of weird stuff like that. But I'm not that worried about that. When you hit an icon and you can see that it was registered because it changes color. I'm seeing that, but yet it's not doing anything. So it's a little frustrating. But we'll make sure that Lucid hears our feedback, and I'm sure they're hearing it from many other people. And I know they're hard at work at that. They hired a whole bunch of Apple engineers, which makes me feel pretty good.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Rivian, where if you remember when the R1T first came out, everyone was complaining about bugs in their software and, oh, it looks
Yeah.
nice, but it's just very slow and unresponsive. And over time, they ironed it out. And now, most people would say it's pretty good. Lucid seems like a similar story where you have a lot of these early adopter issues that seem to one by one be getting ironed out. And that's good to see, right? It's not like they
Yeah.
put crappy hardware in this car. You do have this nice, these glass
Oh yeah.
screens. It's just the software was a little bit unrefined, but they're adding the features, they're adding the refinement bit by bit.
Yeah, the other thing that I just got last night was the car assigned to my name after I got it registered. Lucid would not register the car, so I've been able to test out the app. And the gold standard for the apps is Tesla. It's not Volkswagen, that I can tell you. I don't know about the Porsche app, but the VW ID4 app, oh man, that thing frustrated me. But the Tesla or the Lucid app so far is actually very good. It's pretty snappy. It doesn't have huge functionality in it, but it allows you to precondition the cabin. It allows you to schedule charging times if you're, let's say, you're level two at home. Does not give you the ability to schedule on different times. It has a good maps functionality, and so far I'm pretty impressed with the app. It's good.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And another classic startup thing where, right, they have to get their app right, and they do get it right. And I've got to agree with you. Volkswagen Group's apps overall, across the whole lineup, Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, they're not great. I will say, though, the built-in car software, I haven't had too much personal experience with it, but I know Kyle's used it. He really likes the navigation with how it works and routing chargers. Functionally, it's decent, but it is a lot of haptics and touch stuff going on. And as much as, Porsche gets things like the steering wheel, I think, dead on, really right. Like, it's just so nice and tactile. Other things like the climate menu here, it's a lot going on. It's a little bit overwrought. And in my opinion, not as clean or as minimal as not just Tesla, but also what we just saw with Lucid.
Yeah, the haptic on the Porsche Taycan I don't love. I'd rather have buttons, and Lucid seems to have found a happy medium between actual physical tactile buttons versus, some kind of haptic, you know, poser button. And I think that Porsche has gone to this, Porsche, Audi, Volkswagen has gone to this, and it looks really cool, but I don't know, give me a button. Maybe I'm old school.
Yeah, totally fair. Then let's talk about driving assistance. Have you used Dream Drive much yet on your Lucid?
Yes,
How do you like it?
yes, I have. So Dream Drive Pro is it's an evolutionary rollout. Before UX 2.0 came out, you didn't even have lane centering. So when Kyle had Peter's Lucid for a month, one of the viewers and a friend of ours, Kyle was never able to experience Dream Drive Pro. It tracks very straight. It's you do have very good lane centering. Lane changing is not supported yet. They're going to be evolutionarily, is that a word? Rolling out new features.
Iteratively,
So
or yeah.
iteratively, yeah, they'll be rolling out new features. So right now you have lane centering and an adaptive cruise. And when you put on in Dream Drive Pro, when you put on the turn signal, what happens is the car continues to track straight in the line. It doesn't turn off lane centering like it does in the EGMP platform car. Similar to Tesla, it stays with the lane centering on until you actually introduce a little bit of torque to the steering wheel. When you introduce torque into the steering wheel, you really have to give it a little bit more torque than I want to, and it jolts the car. Once it actually detaches from lane centering, then you manually take the next lane, and once you get into the lane, the Lucid will then manual or automatically regain lane centering in the next lane. Now, the difference between that and I can't remember how InnoDrive works, but I just want to say this because we got to compare it to the gold standard. With Tesla, what's amazing is very tiny amount of torque and it turns off lane centering, which is it's really done better. It's similar to the refinement at the slow speed in the Lucid for hold and just when you're starting to accelerate. They just need to make that a little bit more refined, and I believe they will. But look, I think that the ADAS system from a tracking standpoint is great. It doesn't wander. In fact, the car did something the other day that I've never felt before in any other car with ADAS. And it talks about in the EGMP platform cars, they talk about scooch and HDA2, which means that if you're in the center lane and a truck starts coming over from the right-hand lane into your lane, the car will detect that and scooch over to the left. They claim that that works in HDA2, and I've never felt it. I felt it very deliberately the other day in the Lucid, and I was very pleased that it moved over to the left to avoid it was like a utility truck that was coming into my lane. It was amazing.
Yeah, so it's good to see that they've got a lot of the core functionality working well, and that stuff. Because I think like Rivian still doesn't seem to have the best adaptive cruise, and here at Stream Drive Pro, granted it is that expensive add-on option, but when you have it, it gives you everything. I just think it's a little bit annoying that to get the basic lane centering, you do need the Dream Drive Pro
Yeah,
package.
no doubt, no doubt. It's crazy that you have to spend 10 grand for Dream Drive Pro in order to get lane centering. Um, I do want to talk about one other thing with the Dream Drive Pro. What was it? I can't remember. I'm having a senior moment here. Why don't we go on to the next
Oh, good. If he
subject
comes up, we
and
can
then
edit it back in.
yeah.
But I wanted to mention also Lucid before we go to the Porsche does also have just this impressive suite of like LiDAR, ultrasonic, and cameras and just sensors around the car. So you do know that this is a pretty capable platform. They could even, I think, probably improve further and further with future updates. Not that that should be a selling point, but it's just kind of another thing about this car that I think does make it in some ways more future proof, that it does have such good surround sensors. The Taycan is not bad, but it's really much more standard fare. I mean, look, you're paying $5,300 to get adaptive cruise control on a 90 plus $1,000 car. That's Porsche for you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a rare option to find in the used market, I can tell you. But if you don't have adaptive cruise control, you can't get InnoDrive and lane centering. So
Hmm.
that's why when you see these base prices for these Porsche Taycans, you got to be careful. It's kind of like a little bit of a challenge to know how much it's really going to cost to get, that feature.
Yeah, classic also configurator moment. I enable the technology package and Porsche lets me know, oh, to get that, you need some other features which they've added and tacked onto the price as well. And I'm not even
Yeah.
seeing on the configurator here, where do I get InnoDrive beyond adaptive cruise? I can't even tell on
I
here.
don't know. I think it's a $600 option
Yeah.
from what I recall to authorize it, but I don't know how you would order that on the configurator. But I know that if you have adaptive cruise, you can add it on for about
Oh, here we
600
go. It's
bucks.
another, yep, you're right. $1,600 basically.
Oh, 1600. Yes, 1600. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, decent system. And also, I will say Porsche does offer really cool headlights also for a pretty penny. But in terms of like safety and cruising, I mean, it does the basics, but I do think that as time goes on, the Lucid's going to be a better platform. And also, the thing you have to give Lucid credit for is right, all of their attention is really focused on the Air right now, being their flagship model. So it feels like they're going to roll out, I mean, anything the company can do to this car. The Taycan has good technology from Volkswagen Group, but like realistically, when they release Macan and all these new things, I don't really know if I trust their software team to keep updating Taycan and making it better beyond where it is now.
Yeah. Well, Volkswagen Group is a huge company. You've got competing software engineers working for Volkswagen versus Audi versus Porsche, as opposed to pooling all those resources into one, whereas Lucid has got a singular focus. Right now, Lucid, all of the designers are really focusing a lot internally on Gravity, from what I've heard. I just watched an interview with Derek Jenkins the other day, who's
Hmm.
their chief designer. He's the one who designed the Lucid
Yep.
here, and he's touched a lot of great cars in the past. So they've got some super smart people working on this car. But the Gravity is going to be interesting, and then it'll be interesting to see as they go down market in terms of lower priced cars as well, which is probably at least 2 or 3 years out, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
But the car it's I'm just super impressed with it, and I'm happy that I'm able to contribute to tonight's conversation just because I've been spending time with the car. You can read all you can about these cars, and until you drive them, you really can't tell. This is a crazy challenge, right? Taycan versus Lucid for a lot of different reasons. They're both insanely good cars. I encourage you to drive both and see what makes sense. The Lucid's not for everyone. The Taycan's not for everyone, but they're amazing cars. They really are.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, there you
couldn't
go.
agree more.
There's no wrong choice. I agree with that.
Yeah, there, I mean, let's be honest. If you're in the position to be choosing between your car, these two cars, there are much bigger issues to have in life. So you can't go wrong with either one. And
Yeah,
congrats on your Lucid, Dave. And I
thank
do
you.
hope I have the chance to, well, drive that. I'm sure I will, but also a Taycan at some point. Until now, I'll just have to spend my days in the Porsche configurator, like so many of us car enthusiasts do.
Yeah, no, you'll drive both, Max,
Yeah.
and then we'll get back on and we'll get your impressions because that's the thing. You can drive the cars on the software, but until you get in them, it's really an amazing thing. I do have to figure out my first mod's going to be on the sun visor in the car. The Model X implementation of the sun visor with that glass roof is done perfectly. And the problem is the way the Lucid has the sun visor, it's just getting in the way of my vision
Mm,
of that beautiful roof.
yeah.
And I've got an idea how I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to patent it, and I'm going to sell it to everybody, and then I'm going to retire. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Well, that sounds like a great $1 million idea. I'm looking forward to Dave's Lucid Clean Sun Visor package.
yeah, the only problem is there aren't enough of them on the roads right now, so
Hey,
that's a
just
different issue.
if
But
people are paying $10,000 for lane centering, who knows what they will pay for a good sun
yeah,
visor
I mean,
solution?
yeah, they're paying $10,000 for a lot more than lane centering, but
But
you
you,
know, it's just that what you have today, what's available today, which
mhm,
is all we can evaluate, it's lane centering and it's 10 grand more, so it's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Dave. And yeah, I think that's a good place to settle on this. I know I said for whatever reason that this would be 15 minutes. It's turned out to be much longer. But I hope that all of
I
you
knew that.
watching enjoyed because if you are looking between these two cars, there are a lot of really fundamental nuances and big differences to go over. So I think we did a good job kind of going over all that, Dave.
You know, hopefully this is of value to some of you. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Max, thanks for having me on the channel.
Yeah, see you next time.
All right, take care. Bye bye.